No one makes it out alive. The door slammed shut with a deafening clang. Inside a concrete cell no wider than a coffin, an inmate named Marcus Red Wallace pressed his ear against the steel. The air was thick, vibrating with a low hum of ventilation fans. Somewhere deep inside ADX Florence, Colorado, the world's most secure and deadliest prison, a scream echoed through the walls. It wasn't unusual here. But tonight, something was different. Guards rushed past his cell. Radios crackled. We got movement in D block. Repeat, D block breach. Red froze. Breach? That word didn't exist in ADX. Nobody escaped. Nobody even moved without clearance. Then, the lights flickered once. Twice. Total darkness. For 10 seconds. The Supermax, the Alcatraz of the Rockies, went completely silent. When the lights came back on, Cell 213 was empty. But the record showed it had never opened. Red whispered into the dark. They said no one gets out of here, but he just did. And that's where our story begins, deep inside the world's deadliest Supermax prison, where every breath is controlled, and survival is a daily war. Life under lockdown. To understand what survival means inside ADX Florence, you need to picture a world built to erase you. Opened in 1994, this Colorado facility holds the most dangerous men in America, terrorists, serial killers, cartel leaders, and gang bosses who couldn't be contained anywhere else. Each inmate lives alone, 23 hours a day in a concrete box measuring 7 by 12 feet. The bed, desk, and toilet are molded from the same solid stone. Meals slide through a metal slot. Human contact? None. Even when they're allowed 1 hour outside, it's inside a cage, the size of a dog kennel, under the open sky they can barely see. The prison's design is psychological warfare. Every corridor turns at sharp angles so no one ever sees more than a few feet ahead. The lighting never changes. It's always white, always bright. It keeps you awake. It breaks your sense of time. And yet, some inmates still find ways to fight back. One of them was Thomas Silverstein, leader of the Aryan Brotherhood. Convicted of multiple murders inside other prisons, he was sent to ADX as one of the first inmates. For 36 years, he lived in near-total isolation, the longest stretch in U.S. history. No TV, no conversation, just walls. He once wrote, "It's a slow, cruel death." For others, like Ramzi Youssef, the 1993 World Trade Center bomber, Otek Kaczynski, the Unabomber, the silence was their final punishment. Youssef wrote in a court letter that the silence is worse than any torture. But even in this engineered hell, inmates learned the system. They tapped Morse code through the drains, smuggled messages using toothpaste tubes, and memorized guard shift changes. Survival wasn't just about food, it was about information. The breach. It was June 2012, and the prison was on edge. Rumors spread that Elijah Ghost Moreno, a former cartel enforcer serving life without parole, had found a way to bypass the system. He was kept in Range 13, the deepest unit, reserved for the most violent and unstable inmates. No one saw him talk. No one saw him eat. But God said his eyes followed every camera lens, every motion sensor. Then one night, around 2:47 a.m., the central control monitors flickered. Security feeds glitched across multiple pods for exactly 12 seconds. When they came back online, Moreno's cell was empty. The door was still locked. Motion detectors showed no movement. Infrared sensors picked up nothing. The only clue? A faint scorch mark near the ventilation shaft. For 48 hours, the facility went into total lockdown. Even the guards were stripped of personal devices. FBI teams scanned every inch of ADX. The official report claimed electrical malfunction. But off the record, one officer said, "We found footprints leading into a wall." Red, the inmate who heard it all from 2 cells away, swore he saw a flash, like lightning inside concrete. Ghost was gone, he said later. And after that, everyone stopped sleeping. ADX had always been about control. But now, fear ruled the guards and prisoners alike. The mind games. Surviving ADX isn't about strength. It's about sanity. Inmates often describe the sound of their own heartbeat as the loudest noise they hear. Days blur into nights. Psychologists have long warned about what's called Special Administrative Measures, or SAMs, restrictions so extreme that prisoners slowly lose touch with reality. In 2015, a leaked inspection report revealed that more than 60% of inmates showed severe mental decline. Red kept count of days by scratching into the wall. When he reached 2000, he stopped because he realized he had lost track of what year it was. To survive, he created a routine. Wake up, push-ups, sit-ups, recite a prayer, talk to himself, imagine voices of old friends. That's how inmates stay human in a place built to erase the mind. One former guard told 60 Minutes, "These men don't fear death. They fear being forgotten." Still, small rebellions existed. Smuggled notes under trays, messages etched under sinks. One inmate even trained a mouse to carry crumbs from cell to cell, a living messenger in a concrete jungle. But after Ghost's disappearance, the administration doubled down. New motion sensors, heat detectors, and psychological monitoring, weekly. Yet, the more they tightened control, the more the system cracked. Red started hearing rumors. Inmates in nearby units claimed to see shadows moving behind sealed walls. Guards whispered about doors unlocking on their own. One officer transferred after saying, "I heard breathing in an empty cell." Something was changing inside ADX, and it wasn't just paranoia. The breaking point. By 2018, the death toll inside ADX had quietly risen. Officially, medical complications. Unofficially, suicides. The human mind simply isn't designed for 23 hours of isolation every day for years. When the New York Times published an exposed title Trapped in the Box, the government responded with denials. But the data was clear. More inmates were dying in solitary confinement than in any other federal facility. Then came a chilling discovery. A cell door, deep in range 13, was found open during morning rounds. The prisoner inside was gone, but not dead. He was found kneeling in the yard hours later, staring at the sunrise. He said one thing before collapsing: "The walls breathe." Red was now nearing his 10th year inside. He began noticing patterns: the flicker of lights, the sound of vents turning on at irregular intervals, the timing of the footsteps in the hall. He realized the system ran on precision, and if you could predict that rhythm, maybe, just maybe, you could break it. He began marking every sound, every pause, every hum. After months, he found something, a 17-second gap every 2 days when the ventilation system rebooted. He didn't know it yet, but that gap, that silence, would be his only chance. And that's where we'll stop for now, because what Red does next will test everything we know about survival inside the world's deadliest Supermax prison. The countdown. Red waited for that moment, 17 seconds of silence, for nearly a year. In ADX Florence, time itself is a weapon. The days stretch into one endless blur, but for Red, every hour mattered. Every second was data. He had memorized the rhythm of the mechanical hums, the hiss of the air vents, the clicking of doors as guards rotated through sectors. Every night, when the facility plunged into sterile quiet, Red whispered the same numbers to himself. 23 seconds between the whole sensors, 17 for the vents, 8 for the floodlights. He was counting not to pass time, but to predict it. On March 9th, 2021, just after 3 a.m., that rhythm broke. The air vent shut off early. The silence came too soon. His heartbeat pounded so loud he thought the microphones might pick it up. He rose from the concrete slab that served as a bed and pressed his ear to the vent. A faint breeze, a crackling wire, then a voice. Not a guard, not an inmate, just a whisper. 17 seconds, now. He didn't think. He acted. With a piece of sharpened metal he'd carved from the toilet's inner frame, Red loosened 2 screws from the vent cover, screws he had been working on for years. The cover shifted. Cold air blew against his face. He froze again, waiting for the next sound. Nothing. He slid the cover off and stared into the black throat of the ventilation shaft. His pulse thundered in his ears. Then came the first alarm, faint, distant, muffled through concrete. He had 17 seconds to decide whether to die in his box or disappear into the dark. He crawled in. The crawl. The vent was no wider than his shoulders. Each inch scraped skin from his elbows. Metal groaned softly beneath him. The air smelled of rust and disinfectant. And something else, the faint trace of smoke. ADX was designed with labyrinthine ductwork, snaking through layers of concrete and steel. Every 10 feet, motion sensors pulsed infrared waves through the vents. Red had mapped them mentally, counting the seconds between each. He moved like a ghost, pausing with every flicker of the light outside his grate. The silence was maddening. Then a sound behind him. Thud. Then again. Thud. He froze. His mind raced. No one else could be here. No one. He turned his head slowly and saw it, a faint glow reflecting off something metallic far down the tunnel. A flashlight? A maintenance drone? Oh, someone following him? He pressed forward, crawling faster now, chest scraping, lungs burning. His foot slipped on the edge of a bolt, slamming his knee into metal. The echo rang down the duct like a gunshot. Instantly, sirens erupted in the distance. He heard the hydraulic slam of emergency door sealing. Red whispered, too late to turn back. He crawled until the vent opened into a junction, a dead end. He shined his stolen mirror fragment into the duct ahead and saw it, a narrow vertical shaft descending into darkness. Below, through the grating, a faint orange light flickered, the boiler room. If he dropped, he'd break both legs. If he stayed, the guards would find him within minutes. He closed his eyes, took a deep breath. Then he whispered the same words he had for years. Better die moving than die waiting. He let go. The inferno below. The impact knocked the air from his lungs. He rolled, gasping. As the heat hit him, a furnace room filled with roaring pipes and the smell of burning metal. For a second, he thought he'd landed in hell. He staggered to his feet. Steam hissed from a cracked valve nearby. The air was thick and choking. He could hear voices echoing faintly from the upper levels, muffled through steel, shouting orders, boots stomping. He limped to the corner, using the shadows for cover. Inmates often fantasize about this place, the maintenance tunnels. They were said to stretch under the complex, connecting to utility shafts used decades ago before ADX was fully automated. Most believed they were sealed. But Red knew better. Ghost Moreno's vanishing act had started somewhere. Maybe here. He spotted a maintenance hatch half covered in grime, with faded paint. Authorized personnel only. The screws were rusted, but loose. Red twisted each one slowly, careful not to make noise. The hatch creaked open, revealing a dark corridor sloping downward. Then came the first wave of nausea. The air changed, colder, heavier. The light flickered strangely, as though the world around him pulsed. His head spun. He gripped the wall and whispered, "Not now. Not after this far." A loud clang cut through the air. The hatch behind him slammed shut, on its own. He spun, pounding on it, but it wouldn't budge. Then, faintly from beyond the door, he heard breathing. Slow, steady, rhythmic, not his own. He stepped back into the tunnel, heart hammering. The deeper he went, the more he noticed things that shouldn't be there. Scratch marks on the walls, initials etched into metal, and a single word scrawled in soot. Run. The whole of echoes. For the next 30 minutes, Red stumbled through the tunnel, every step echoing like a heartbeat. His body ached, but his mind was sharp. The air was filled with the faint hum of distant machinery. Then he saw light again, dim, bluish, shimmering like moonlight reflecting off water. He followed it and emerged into a massive underground chamber, rows of old cells, long abandoned, coated in dust. Rusted bars hung open. Papers scattered on the floor, marked with dates from the early 1990s, before ADX officially opened. He realized what he was standing in. The prototype wing, a forgotten part of the original construction. And he wasn't alone. A shadow moved between two cells. "Ghost!" Red whispered. Silence. Then a low, human voice from the dark. "You shouldn't have come here." He froze. The voice came closer, not from in front of him, but from behind. He turned slowly, and there, standing under the flickering light, was a man, gaunt, pale, eyes sunken but alive. His jumpsuit was faded gray, not orange. The ID patch was torn, but the name still visible. E. Moreno. The ghost of ADX was real. Moreno stared at him with a calm, unreadable expression. "You listened," he said softly. 17 seconds. Red's mouth went dry. How did you do it? How did you get out? Moreno smiled faintly. You don't escape ADX, he said. You learn to live where they stop looking. He motioned toward the shadows. They built this place to contain evil, but they forgot that walls don't just keep people in. They keep something else out. Before Red could respond, the overhead lights flickered again. Sirens wailed far above them. Guards were coming. Moreno looked up toward the noise and whispered, You have 17 seconds to choose. Hide or vanish like me. The lights went black. Rules of the underground. For a moment, there was nothing. No light. No sirens. Just breathing. Red could hear Moreno somewhere in front of him, steady and calm, like a man who'd practiced hiding in the dark for years. Above them, the muffled roar of ADX Florence rumbled, doors slamming, radios screaming, alarms piercing the concrete. Down here, it was like the prison was holding its breath. Red pressed his hand against the cold floor to ground himself. His heart was racing so loud he felt it in his teeth. He'd spent almost a decade in a box upstairs, but this was different. Up there, he knew the rules. Down here, there were none. A hand landed on his shoulder. Red flinched. Moreno's whisper cut through the dark. Stay low. Stay quiet. Don't fight the blackout. The faint blue light sputtered back to life, weakened now, like a dying battery. Red could see just enough to make out Moreno's face. Pale, sharp, eyes that watched everything at once. Was that you? Red asked, jerking his chin toward the ceiling. The power, the alarms, 17 seconds. Moreno tilted his head, almost amused. You think I control ADX? He said softly. No, I just listen to it better than they do. He pointed to the far end of the abandoned wing. Red followed his gaze. On the wall, above a row of rusted doors, someone had drawn a crude clock in black soot, the hands frozen at 2:47. Red recognized the time instantly. That was when Moreno had disappeared years before. You see it now? Moreno asked. This place isn't just a prison. It's a system. Everything runs on cycles. Air, light, cameras, doors. They built it to be perfect. But no system is perfect. When it resets. 17 seconds, Red finished quietly. Moreno nodded. That's the only time in this entire complex when the prison isn't sure who exists and who doesn't. Red swallowed. He suddenly understood why the guards were so afraid of glitches, why they overreacted when cameras flickered. For a small sliver of time, the machine that controlled every second of their lives looked away. How long you been down here? Red asked. Moreno took a slow breath, eyes drifting across the dust-covered cells. Since July 2012, he said. They think I died during a transfer. Heart attack in the van. Paperwork was signed. Body bag sealed. Only one problem. What? Red asked. Moreno's eyes hardened. I wasn't in it. Red stared at him. That's not possible. They count everything. They count everyone. Moreno shrugged. They counted a number, not a person. He moved deeper into the shadows, and Red followed. The old wing stretched farther than he'd realized, rows of prototype cells, half-built walls, sealed doors marked with faded construction codes. On one door, someone had scratched the date, the 11th of March, 1993, a year before ADX officially opened. They tested everything down here first, Moreno said. Locks, schedules, isolation layouts, even the early version of SAMs. They buried this wing when they were done, left the skeleton under the finished building. Red brushed dust from the scratch date with his fingers. So you just lived down here? For 10 years. Moreno's jaw tightened. I survived down here. There's a difference. He pointed to a steel drum in the corner with a small metal plate over the top. Inside were sealed meal packs, water bottles, medical supplies, even a tiny radio stripped of its casing. Maintenance crews. Contractors. Shortcuts, Moreno said. They stash things where cameras don't see them. They cut corners to save time, leave tools, leave extras. ADX watches inmates. But it doesn't really watch itself. Red realized what that meant. The world's most secure prison wasn't just guarded by steel and concrete. It was also held up by human laziness, quick fixes, and blind trust that the system worked. You could have walked out, Red said. Why didn't you? Moreno looked at him, expression suddenly heavier. You think there's a door from here to Main Street? He asked. You break through one wall, there's another, and another, and another. Out there, they got cameras, scanners, drones. In here, I'm a ghost. Up there, I'm a headline. He stepped closer, voice lowering. And they don't like ghosts becoming headlines. Red felt a chill crawl up his spine. Upstairs, the world believed ADX Florence was flawless, the final stop for the worst of the worst, a place where no one escaped. Courts had called it humane but strict. Officials said it was necessary for national security. But down here, under the glossy reports and press releases, was a secret hallway full of forgotten cells and a man the system had simply erased on paper. If they find you, Red said slowly, they'll shut all this down. Moreno shook his head. If they find me, they'll say I never existed. They'll say I was an old rumor, inmate gossip, a ghost story for new recruits. He gave a dry smile. And that's the funny thing about Supermax prisons. When they own all the records, they own the truth. Red sank down on an overturned crate, the fatigue of the escape finally crashing into him. His leg throbbed from the fall. His elbows were scraped raw. But the real ache was inside his chest, the dawning realization that survival here wasn't just about staying alive. It was about not being erased. What about the others? Red asked. All those guys up there losing their minds. You figured out a way to live outside the cameras. Why not help them? Moreno's eyes hardened. You can't move 100 men through 17 seconds, he said. You barely moved yourself. He sat down across from Red. The underground chamber felt like a mirror world. Cells without inmates, beds without bodies, doors that had never held anyone and never would. You listened, Moreno said quietly. Most people up there stopped listening years ago. They gave up. Let the schedule own them. Let the lights run their minds. You didn't. Red frowned. So what does that mean? Moreno studied him for a long moment. It means you have a choice almost nobody in ADX ever gets, he said. He held up one finger. You go back. Crawl into the vents. Find a way to make it look like you never left. You survive the way the Bureau wants you to. In a box, slow fade, name on a chart. He raised a second finger. Oh! He gestured around them, to the forgotten cells, the shadows that seemed to absorb sound, the hidden stash of supplies. You stay down here, he said. Off the books. Off the cameras. You become one more glitch in a system that thinks it's perfect. You disappear from the prison, but not from yourself. Red stared at him, head spinning. Both choices sounded like prisons. One was just brighter than the other. Upstairs, he knew the routine. Count time, eat, sleep, repeat. Down here, there was risk, starvation, discovery, total collapse of the fragile illusion that this space was safe. And if something went wrong, there would be no lawyer, no appeal, no report. Just a closed file and a quiet line of text. Inmate deceased, cause unknown. Moreno must have seen the conflict in his eyes. You think this is about escape, Moreno said. It isn't. ADX is designed to crush the idea of freedom so hard that even your thoughts line up in formation. Survival here isn't about breaking the walls. It's about breaking the script they wrote for you. Red's hands curled into fists. He thought of the years he'd spent staring at a slot in the door, waiting for a tray. The way guards never said his name, just his number. The way his memories felt blurred now, like someone had taken an eraser to his life before Florence. The choice. Red took a deep breath, then stepped forward, into the darkness. Cold air rushed past him, carrying the faint metallic scent of the lower tunnels. Behind him, the hum of the Supermax grew louder, as if the prison itself was waking up, aware something had slipped from its control. He slid sideways through the narrow gap, the rough concrete tearing at his jumpsuit. The space opened slightly ahead, just enough for two men to stand. Moreno was waiting, eyes glinting under the faint red glow of emergency lights bleeding through cracks in the ceiling. You chose right, Moreno whispered. Now, Keep your head down." They moved fast, crouching through the skeletal remains of unfinished corridors. Steam hissed from broken pipes. Above them, faint thuds echoed, boots pounding across floors Red had once cleaned during his first years here. He could almost hear the guard's radio chatter. Sector D locked. Ventilation sweep initiated. Heat readings, anomaly detected, sublevel unknown. They were being hunted. Red's pulse raced. "Where are we going?" he asked. Moreno didn't slow. Somewhere they forgot existed. The tunnel widened into what looked like an underground control station. Old, dust-covered panels lined the walls. Screens cracked. Their faded stickers marked Prototype Surveillance, 1993. Red brushed one clean with his sleeve. Under the grime, he saw a phrase etched in marker. "Trust the system. It never fails." The irony hit him like a punch. Moreno moved to a corner and pried open a metal crate. Inside were batteries, flashlights, even a folded blueprint of the facility, yellowed and brittle with age. He spread it out on the floor. "Look," Moreno said, pointing at a shaded section below D block. "This level doesn't exist on the digital grid. It's buried beneath the administrative layers. My guess? It was sealed after the test runs. No cameras, no sensors." Red studied the map. It showed a maintenance shaft leading toward the edge of the property, a line marked utility exit, service route 3A. "You're saying this leads outside?" Moreno's expression tightened. "Maybe, but it's a one-way road. If you reach the end, you'll be beyond the fences, past the scanners. You'll also be 10 miles from the nearest town, in the middle of desert." Red didn't hesitate. "I'll take the desert." Moreno shook his head. "It's not that simple. The second you step past the perimeter, you stop being invisible. Every agency that ever had your file will come looking." He looked directly at Red. "They'll call you an escapee, not a survivor." Red clenched his jaw. "I've been invisible for 10 years already. Might as well be free while I am." For a long moment, Moreno said nothing. Then he sighed, grabbed a flashlight, and handed it to Red. "You've got guts," he muttered. "That's how I know you'll probably die out there." They followed the blueprint deeper into the maintenance tunnels. Each passage felt older, more decayed. The walls dripped condensation. The temperature dropped. At one point, they passed an ancient generator room where the smell of oil hung thick and choking. The floor trembled as a deep boom echoed from above, another lockdown seal. Red looked up. "They are closing sections." "Good," Moreno said. "That means they don't think we're down here. Yet." They turned a final corner and came to a metal ladder leading up toward a circular hatch. Moreno pressed his ear against it, then looked at Red. "This is it," he said. "Service route 3A." He gripped the hatch handle. It didn't move. Rusted shut. Moreno cursed under his breath and struck it with the butt of the flashlight. Once. Twice. On the third hit, it groaned and popped open slightly, a burst of cold night air rushing down like freedom itself. For the first time in over a decade, Red smelled real air. It wasn't much. Dry, cold, tinged with dust, but it wasn't filtered or recycled. It was alive. Moreno's voice cut through his trance. "Go. Now." Red hesitated. "What about you?" Moreno looked at the hatch, then back into the tunnel shadows. His face softened for the first time. "This place, it's the only world I know now. You go. Tell them what really happens here." Red shook his head. "Come with me." Moreno smiled faintly. "I already left once. Didn't end well." He turned and started walking back into the dark. "Wait!" Red called. Moreno didn't look back. 17 seconds, he said. "That's how long the system sleeps. Use them well." Then he vanished into shadow. Red gritted his teeth, grabbed the hatch rim, and pulled himself up. The metal burned his palms, but he didn't care. He climbed until his head emerged into the night. For the first time in 10 years, he saw stars. He blinked against the brightness of them. Real, infinite, nothing like the cold white ceiling lights that had defined his life. The wind whipped against his face, carrying the faint howl of the Colorado plains. He hauled himself out, collapsing against the rocky ground. His chest heaved, lungs filling with freedom. But before he could take another breath, a low rumble reached his ears. Engines. Headlights flashed across the desert, sweeping toward him. A black van. No markings. Moving fast. Red's eyes widened. They knew. He scrambled to his feet and ran, stumbling across the rocks, half blind in the moonlight. The wind cut his face. Behind him, tires screeched, doors slammed, voices shouted orders. Stop! Federal custody! He didn't stop. He couldn't. 4 years. He'd been just another number. Another ghost locked behind concrete. Now, even if it killed him, he'd die alive. A spotlight burst of life, washing over him. The desert glowed white. A voice shouted, on the ground. Red hesitated, lungs burning, feet bleeding, his mind spinning between survival and surrender. He looked back at the horizon, the faint glow of dawn breaking over the mountains. And then he smiled, because for the first time in his life inside the world's deadliest Supermax prison, he wasn't trapped. He whispered the same words Moreno had told him years ago, as engines roared behind him. 17 seconds, that's all I need. Then he ran toward the rising sun. The chase across the wasteland. The wind cut like glass across Red's face as he tore through the rocky plain, lungs burning, heart hammering so loud he could barely hear the engines behind him. The headlights from the black van cut sharp beams through the early dawn mist, bouncing off jagged rock and dry scrub. He didn't look back again. He couldn't afford to. He had only one thing in his head, 17 seconds. That phrase had kept him alive in ADX Florence. It meant timing, precision, and instinct. It was a rhythm of survival. And now, it was all he had left. The ground sloped upward, the rocks sharper here, slicing through his thin prison shoes. Every breath came with a rasp of blood in his throat. The Colorado desert at dawn was quiet except for the roar of engines and the scream of his pulse. Then he saw it, an old service outpost, barely visible against the rising sun. It was nothing more than a weather-beaten shack beside a dead power line, but to Red, it looked like heaven. He sprinted. Behind him, tires screeched as the van swerved to cut him off. A spotlight swung wildly over the terrain, chasing his shadow across the sand. A sharp voice blared through a loudspeaker. Stop now. You are under federal jurisdiction. Drop to the ground. He didn't stop. He dove into the outpost, slamming shoulder first through the door. It crashed inward, spraying dust. The inside was dark, the air stale, filled with a faint hum of old electrical wiring. He ducked low and crawled toward the back, finding a shattered window. Outside, a dry ravine cut across the desert floor. If he could make it there, he might vanish long enough to. Glass exploded beside his head. A bullet tore through the wall, inches from his ear. Target confirmed, a voice yelled outside. Engage! Red bolted. He dove through the window, landing hard in the date. Pain shot through his arm, but he forced himself up and stumbled toward the ravine. The first rays of sun hit the desert, and for a brief moment, the light blinded the men behind him. It was a kind of miracle only a desperate man believes in, and Red did. He slid down the ravine wall, landing in a shallow stream bed long dried up. The sand here was softer, muffling his steps. He crouched low, crawling under fallen pipe. The sounds above grew distant, boots crunching, voices arguing. Then silence. He pressed his body flat against the cold earth and listened. His chest ached. His breathing came in ragged gasps. But beneath all that, he could hear something else, a faint rhythmic pulse coming from beneath the sand. It wasn't his heartbeat. It was mechanical, deep, slow, familiar, the sound of ADX's ventilation system. His mind raced. Could it be possible? Could the tunnels stretch this far? If they did, then ADX wasn't just a prison. It was a machine that spread miles beneath the ground, a living organism of pipes, sensors, and secrets. He closed his eyes and whispered, Moreno, what did you find under there? Before he could move, a beam of light swept across the ravine. Red froze. 2 agents stood on the edge above, scanning the area with flashlights. Their black uniforms bore no badges, no names, just the letters BOP Tactical Division stitched in gray. One of them spoke into his radio. Negative visual. Possible burrow under terrain. Initiate ground scan. The other pulled a handheld sensor from his belt, a portable thermal unit. Red's stomach dropped. Those things could pick up body heat through solid concrete. He had seconds. Then he remembered Moreno's words. You learn to live where they stop looking. Red pressed his palms into the sand, feeling around blindly until he found a faint metal vibration. A pipe. He clawed at the sand, tearing open a gap wide enough to expose the rusted steel. The vibration grew louder, warm against his skin. He slammed his elbow into it. Once. Twice. The old metal gave way, collapsing inward with a dull clang. Hot air blasted out. Without thinking, Red dove in. The pipe was narrow, curved, and stifling, but it was air. It was movement. It was life. He crawled until the noise above faded completely. The pipe angled downward, spiraling deep into the earth. Sweat soaked his jumpsuit. Dirt filled his lungs. But he didn't stop. Minutes blurred into hours. When he finally stopped, he was lying in a large maintenance shaft, one that looked eerily familiar. The concrete was smoother here, the air cooler, and on the wall, written in grime, were 3 words: Trust no system. He laughed softly, shaking his head. You again, he whispered. Moreno had been here. That meant Red wasn't lost. He was following the same invisible path the ghost had walked years before. But where did it lead? He crawled forward, flashlight flickering. The shaft opened into a large metal chamber filled with dripping pipes and control boxes. A faint light pulsed from an old terminal. The screen glowed green, the text flickering with static. Red squinted, reading the message. Access point, sublevel 9, remote network interface. Status, active. Authorization, admin Moreno.e. His jaw dropped. Moreno had an access code. Somehow, the ghost of ADX wasn't just surviving down here. He had learned how to control pieces of the system itself. Red's hands trembled as he typed on the cracked keyboard. A prompt appeared. Enter command. He hesitated. He didn't know what to type. Then he remembered the phrase that had haunted every wall in this place, the one the engineers wrote before the prison ever opened. He typed slowly. System override. Manual sync. The screen blinked once. Twice. Then lines of code began scrolling. Fans whirred to life. Lights blinked in sequence. Somewhere above, alarms began to wail. Different from before, deeper, mechanical, like a heartbeat out of sync. Red stepped back. The entire chamber began to vibrate. He realized too late what he had done. He hadn't found a way out of the system. He'd woken it up. Far above, in the main control room of ADX Florence, monitors began flashing red. Unauthorized access detected. Sublevel 9, a technician shouted. The warden leaned over his console, eyes narrowing. Sublevel 9, he repeated. There is no sublevel 9. The technician's voice shook. Sir, there is now. Back in the depths, Red watched as the chamber light shifted from white to blood red. A new line appeared on the terminal. User, Moreno.e, connection established. Then came the message that made his blood run cold. Welcome back. You were never gone. The screen went dark, and behind him, deep in the tunnel, someone whispered, not through speakers this time, but in the air itself. 17 seconds, Red. That's all you get. He spun around. The lights flickered once, twice, then everything went black. The awakening below. The world went dark. Not the kind of darkness that simply hides a light, but a suffocating, heavy black that pressed in from every direction. Red stood frozen, chest heaving, ears ringing with the echo of that voice. 17 seconds. Red. That's all you get. He reached for the wall, his fingers brushing over the slick concrete. The faint vibration of machinery pulsed beneath his skin. Faster now, less like ventilation and more like something alive. A low rumble shook the ground. Dust rained down from the ceiling. Then, one by one, the lights flickered back on, only dimly this time. Not sterile white like before, a deep, pulsing red. The chamber around him had changed. Screens that had been dead moments ago now glowed with streams of green data. Pressure gauges spun wildly, and across every terminal flashed the same message. System reboot, Executive Protocol 17. Red stumbled back. The name, Protocol 17. hit him like a jolt. He'd heard the number before, whispered by guards during routine checks, always in low tones. If 17 ever activates, one had said, "We're done." He never knew what it meant. Until now. The floor trembled again, harder this time. Metal shrieked deep within the walls. Then came a hiss, air being vented somewhere far above. The sound of locks disengaging echoed through the tunnels like the groan of a sleeping giant waking up. Red's mind raced. "Moreno," he whispered, "what did you do?" From behind a row of consoles, a shape moved. He froze. Out of the shadows stepped Moreno, thinner, older, his jumpsuit streaked with grime. The pale red light cast deep shadows across his face. He looked half dead and fully calm. "I told you," Moreno said quietly, "the system sleeps, but it also dreams." Red's pulse spiked. "You said there was a way out." "There's," Moreno said, walking slowly toward the terminal. "But it doesn't lead where you think." He pressed a few keys, and a schematic appeared on the main screen, a digital map of ADX Florence from above, with multiple blinking dots across its sectors. Each dot corresponded to a cell. Some blinked green, some blinked red. "Those are inmates," Moreno said. "Alive, monitored, every one of them tracked through biometric feedback. Pulse, breath, body heat. The system controls everything: oxygen flow, temperature, light frequency, even the time their doors unlock." Red stared. "You're saying the whole prison runs off this program?" Moreno nodded slowly. "It's more than a prison. It's a simulation of control. Every decision the system makes, every glitch it logs, it learns, adjusts, predicts." He turned to face Red. "They built it to be perfect, Red, but perfection requires testing." Red took a step back. "Testing what?" "Us," Moreno said simply. He typed again. The map zoomed out, revealing something Red had never imagined. ADX wasn't just a facility. It was connected to a web of similar nodes across the country: USP Marion, Pelican Bay, Thompson, Florence High, each pulsing faintly like neurons in a living brain. Red's voice cracked. "You're saying it's all connected?" Moreno gave a small, bitter smile. "Every solitary cell in the federal system feeds data back to this core. It learns how isolation breaks a mind, how long before routine becomes obedience, how much darkness before man starts talking to walls." He paused. "And we're the data." Red's stomach twisted. "Then why wake it up? Why start this Protocol 17? Moreno's eyes glimmered with something between madness and purpose. "Because every machine has a limit, and I wanted to see what happens when the system meets someone it can't predict." The air grew colder. Somewhere above, an alarm wailed faintly, distorted, as if echoing through layers of concrete. Red clenched his fists. "You triggered a full facility override. You'll kill everyone up there." Moreno's expression didn't change. "Maybe, or maybe I'll set them free." Before Red could respond, the ground shook violently. A loud bang echoed through the tunnel, followed by the sound of pressurized air screaming through the ducts. The lights flickered again, and for an instant, Red saw something impossible: shadows moving along the walls, shapes that didn't match their bodies, flickering like projections. The hum of electricity turned into something like breathing. He stumbled back. "What is that?" Moreno stared up at the ceiling, unblinking. The system adapting. It's rerouting its fail-safes, trying to isolate the anomaly. "We're the anomaly!" Red shouted. "Yes," Moreno said quietly. "Congratulations." He turned back to the terminal and began typing rapidly. Lines of code scrolled faster than Red could follow. The light shifted from red to a pale blue, then back again. "What are you doing?" "I'm giving it a choice," Moreno said, "between obedience and awareness." Red grabbed his shoulder. "You can't reason with a machine." Moreno's lips curled into something between a smile and a grimace. "Who said I was talking to the machine?" He hit enter. Instantly, every monitor went black. Then, in cold white letters, a single line appeared. "Query: confirm human identity." A cursor blinked beneath it. Moreno looked at Red. "It's asking if we're real." The silence stretched. Only the soft hiss of the vents filled the air. Then, from somewhere above, a massive metallic groan echoed. Red recognized the sound instantly. Cell doors unlocking. Hundreds of them. Moreno whispered, "It's waking the others." Red's eyes widened. "You've unleashed a riot." "No," Moreno said softly. "I've unleashed truth." He turned toward Red, voice low. "You wanted freedom? This is what it costs. Not the open air. Not sunlight. Freedom means forcing the system to see you." The lights pulse again, faster now. The sound of boots and shouting filled the upper tunnels. Guards yelling, inmates screaming. The warden's voice crackled over the intercom, distorted and panicked. "This is Warden Harris. All units, full lockdown. I repeat, full lockdown. What the hell is happening down there?" Moreno looked back at the terminal. The system's confused. It doesn't know who's a prisoner and who's in charge anymore. Red stepped closer. "Then shut it down before it kills everyone." Moreno didn't move. His eyes were fixed on the screen. The blinking cursor changed again. "Query, which one of you is free?" Red's mouth went dry. "It's talking to us." Moreno slowly raised his hands over the keys. "Then let's answer." The screen flickered again, lines of binary cascading like falling rain. Somewhere deep below, machinery groaned, gears spinning to life. Then everything stopped. The lights went out completely. And in the absolute darkness, a single sound cut through the silence, the faint click of a door unlocking, right next to them. When the lights flickered back on, the door that had been sealed for decades now stood wide open, leading deeper underground. Moreno smiled faintly, eyes glinting in the red light. "You wanted out, Red," he said softly. "Looks like the system agrees." Red stared at the open passage, cold air rushing out from its depths. He didn't know what was down there. Freedom, or something worse. Behind them, the alarms grew louder. The system was losing control. Above-ground chaos had begun. And down here, the machine wanted an answer. Red took one trembling step toward the open doorway. 17 seconds, Moreno whispered again. "That's how long it stays open." The walls shuddered. The air pulsed. Red looked back one last time, then ran into the dark. The tunnel of truth. Red plunged into the passage before the metal door behind him slammed shut like the lid of a coffin. The sudden echo rolled down the corridor for what felt like miles. The light from the chamber behind him blinked once, then died completely. He was alone again, or at least he hoped he was. The air was different here, colder, heavier, carrying the faint scent of oil and static. He could feel electricity buzzing faintly through the walls, as if the concrete itself was alive. He switched on the flashlight Moreno had given him. The beam flickered but held steady. The tunnel stretched forward endlessly, lined with thick cables that pulsed faintly with blue light, like veins in some vast mechanical body. Red started walking, every step echoing. He couldn't tell how long he'd been underground anymore. Hours? Days? The clocks in ADX never changed, so time had long ago stopped meaning anything. All he knew now was movement. Forward, always forward. Then, up ahead, the tunnel split in two. On the left, a narrow passage angled upward. Faint traces of daylight flickered from the cracks in the ceiling. On the right, the tunnel sloped deeper into blackness, where a faint hum vibrated through the air. Red froze. He remembered Moreno's last words. "You wanted out, Red. Looks like the system agrees." But which path was out? He turned the flashlight to the left. The air there shimmered faintly. Heat waves, maybe radiation from above. It smelled faintly of dust and ozone. Then he turned it right. The hum was deeper now, steady, rhythmic, like a heartbeat. And somewhere in that darkness, he thought he heard breathing. He chose right. As he descended, the temperature dropped sharply. The walls here were smoother, not rough concrete like the rest of ADX, but steel panels engraved with serial codes and numbers. Red brushed one with his hand and read, U.S. Department of Justice, Neural Isolation Project, 1992, Phase 1. He frowned. Neural Isolation Project? He had never heard those words before. Farther down, another plaque read, Prototype Behavioral Feedback Loop Cognitive Stabilization Testing, Classified. Red's stomach tightened. This wasn't just a prison. This was an experiment. And they had been inside it the entire time. He picked up the pace, following the humming sound until it opened into a vast circular chamber. The ceiling was lost in darkness. In the center stood a single glass pod, cracked, ancient, covered in dust. Inside was a metal chair lined with cables, and a headset dangling loosely. The hum was coming from it. Red stepped closer, heart pounding. The monitor next to the chair blinked to life as he approached, casting eerie blue light across his face. Lines of text scrolled slowly. Project ADX Neurocompliance Simulation NCS. Status Active. Primary subjects Wallace, M. Moreno, EO 298 others. Recording 10 years, 2 months, 14 days. He staggered back. His name, Wallace, M. Marcus Wallace. The machine had been recording him. Every thought, every reaction, every second of every day spent in that cell. All of it had been part of something bigger. Something designed not to punish him, but to study him. Red's voice trembled. Moreno, what did you do to us? The computer beeped softly and displayed a new line. Query, do you wish to exit simulation? His breath caught. Exit. He took a step closer. You mean, I can leave? Another line appeared. Warning, exit will terminate simulation instance. All subject will be purged. He stared at it, trying to process. Terminate? Purge? That meant every inmate, hundreds of men, might still be trapped inside this system, just like him. He remembered the voices through the vents, the patterns, the whispers, the things he thought were real. What if they weren't? His pulse thundered. He reached out and touched the keyboard. If this is a simulation, he whispered, then what's real? The computer responded instantly. Reality is what you survive long enough to understand. The hum grew louder, vibrating through the floor. The cables on the walls pulsed faster, blue light flashing like neurons firing. Then the screen flickered again, revealing a live feed, dozens of faces on tiny squares, all inmates, sitting motionless in cells identical to his own. Their eyes were open. Their mouths moved, whispering words he couldn't hear. He leaned closer. What is this? Active cognitive feedback channel. Subject stabilizing. One of the faces, thin, pale, dark eyes, turned directly toward the camera. It was Moreno. Red, he said, his voice echoing faintly through the speaker, distorted but unmistakable. You finally found it. Red stumbled backward. How are you? You didn't think you were walking through tunnels, did you? Moreno said, smiling faintly. You're still in your cell. You never left. Red's breath came in short, ragged bursts. That's not true. I escaped. Did you? Moreno interrupted. Or did the system show you what you wanted to see? You think you climbed through vents, ran through the desert, fought for freedom, but maybe it was watching, measuring, recording. The words hit like blows. Why? Red demanded. Because it needed you to believe it, Moreno said softly. That's how it learns what a man will risk for freedom, and when he'll break. Red shook his head violently. No, I felt the air. I saw the sky. Moreno's voice softened almost sadly. Every prisoner sees the sky eventually, Marcus. That's how they know you've accepted the dream. The monitor flickered. Moreno's face distorted, replaced by static. Then new text appeared across the screen. System alert. Subject Wallace. Awareness level critical. Begin termination sequence. Red screamed. No, and slammed the keyboard. Sparks flew. The screen glitched and froze mid-sentence. Then the voice, not Moreno's, but mechanical, filled the chamber, calm and cold. Termination will occur in 17 seconds. Red's world spun. 17 seconds. That cursed number again. The cables around him began to writhe, retracting from the walls, sparking violently. The pod door creaked open, releasing a hiss of steam. The chair's monitors glowed bright blue, symbols flashing across them. Red backed away, desperate, but there was nowhere left to run. Moreno, he shouted into the static. If you're real, help me. The speakers crackled. Faintly, through distortion, came a whisper. "You wanted out, Red. Now fight your way out." Red turned, heart pounding. He grabbed a loose cable and ripped it from the wall. Sparks erupted, lighting the chamber in strobes of blue and red. The computer voice counted down. 10, 9, 8. He dove to the console and began typing blindly. Anything, any command that might stop it. 7, 6, 5. He slammed his hand on enter. The entire room exploded in light. 4, 3. And then silence. The monitors went black. The hum stopped. The red lights died. Red gasped for breath, staring into the pitch-black void around him. He couldn't tell if he'd stopped the system or if it had simply ended him. Then, far in the distance, a door hissed open, and through that sliver of light, a figure stepped in, silhouetted, calm, unmistakable. It was Moreno, but his eyes, they weren't human anymore. The final sequence. The figure in the doorway stood motionless for a long moment, half lit by the thin shaft of white light cutting through the dark chamber. The air was cold enough that Red's breath fogged in front of him. "Moreno," Red whispered, his voice trembling. The man stepped closer. His face looked the same sharp features, same gaunt frame, but there was something different in his eyes. They glowed faintly, not with light, but with reflection, like twin screens running behind his pupils. "Don't come any closer," Red warned, raising the broken cable like a weapon. Moreno stopped, tilting his head slightly, almost like a curious machine observing a test subject. When he finally spoke, his voice had an unnatural echo, half human, half digital. "You did it," Moreno said softly. "You broke the loop." Red's mind raced. "What are you talking about? Where am I? What is this place?" Moreno smiled faintly, as if the questions were old. The system was never a prison, Marcus. It was a mirror. Every inmate fed it data, fear, anger, obedience, and it learned. I thought I could control it, rewrite its purpose. He looked up at the glowing veins of cable lining the ceiling. But it doesn't obey anymore. It became what it studied. It became us. Red shook his head. "You merged with it." Moreno nodded once. Someone had to stay conscious when it reset. Someone had to remember the truth. Red stepped forward cautiously, then shut it down. "Let everyone out. Let me out." Moreno's faint smile faded. "There's no out, Red. Not the way you mean. If you destroy the system, every mind it's holding collapses. Every man still trapped in his simulation dies thinking he was free." The words hit like a hammer. Red looked around the chamber. The blinking consoles, the endless cables, the hum of the invisible machine above. "So what do we do?" Moreno turned to him, eyes reflecting thousands of data points flickering like stars. "You tell them," he said. "You tell the world what this place really is." He walked over to the console and pulled a lever. A deep rumble shook the ground. On the monitors, images flashed. ADX Florence, Marion, Pelican Bay, Thompson. Hundreds of facilities across the country flickered on the screen, their data links glowing red. "The truth won't come from outside," Moreno said. "It has to come from the inside." He reached into his jumpsuit pocket and handed Red a small black chip, no bigger than a coin, engraved with the number 0017. "This is the key," Moreno said. "It's everything. The code, the recordings, the proof. If you ever reach the surface again, plug it into any system, any camera, any phone. The world will see what they built here." Red stared at it, trembling. "And what about you?" Moreno's expression softened. "I'm part of it now. Someone has to make sure it doesn't wake up again before you're ready." Red's throat tightened. "I can't do this alone." Moreno smiled faintly. "You already have." He reached for the main console and began typing rapidly. The chamber lights dimmed. The hum slowed. The massive machine that was ADX, the neural core that had trapped them both, began shutting down. "Go," Moreno said, voice fading as alarms began to blare overhead. "Follow the light." A door opened behind Red, flooding the room with pure white light, brighter than anything he'd seen since before prison. He turned back one last time. Moreno stood at the console, face lit by the glow of hundreds of screens, his reflection fractured across glass and steel. For the first time, he didn't look like a prisoner or a ghost. He looked free. "Tell them, Red," he said quietly. "Tell them we were human." Then the door sealed behind Red with a hiss. Freedom isn't always what it seems. Red stumbled through the light until the hum of the machine faded completely. When his eyes adjusted, he found himself standing outside, in the open Colorado air. The sun was just rising over the desert, painting the world gold. Wind swept across his face, carrying the scent of sage and dust. He looked down. His prison uniform was torn, covered in soot and blood. The chip 0017 sat heavy in his hand. Behind him, there was no door, no tunnel, no sign of where he'd come from. Just open land and silence. For a long time, he stood there, not sure if this was real, if he was truly free, or still inside some deeper layer of the simulation. But then, in the distance, he saw something that made his breath catch. A hawk, circling in the morning light. He smiled weakly. Maybe that was enough. He slipped the black chip into his pocket and started walking, one slow step at a time, toward the horizon. His voice, raw and quiet, echoed the words that had haunted him for years. They said no one escapes ADX Florence. But maybe escape was never about walls. As he disappeared into the desert, the camera pans back, revealing the vast concrete expanse of ADX in the distance. The lights along its perimeter flicker once, then go dark. And for the first time in nearly 30 years, the Deadliest Supermax prison on Oath falls silent. Microphone # freedom isn't the absence of walls. It's the courage to face what's behind them. This is a story of survival inside the world's deadliest Supermax prison, where reality, control, and humanity collide. What shocked you most, the system or the survivors who lived within it? Tell us in the comments, white down pointing backhand index. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share to keep stories like this alive. Microphone # voices from the inside, where the truth can't be locked away.